Well, what if I told you that we've seen quite a few posts lately on some of these Facebook driver forums asking about navigating a small market? I'm posting this because I live in a small market, and we're technically part of the Twin Cities metropolitan area. We do have a lot of commuters that go back and forth between the cities and the Forest Lake area. But that said, we don't have any delivery overlap between restaurants in the suburban ring of the Twin Cities and here. So there's not really any overlap between our delivery market and theirs. So we're basically our own world out here. And so, as I've explained before, the city of Forest Lake has a population of about 21,000. You add up all the cities around that are kind of within about 10 to 20 miles of Forest Lake, you get a population of about 60,000, which is what makes us big enough to have a Walmart and a Target and a Cub Foods, which is the regional grocery store chain. So we're big enough to have all of those major retail outlets, big box outlets, but we're not big enough to have much more than that. We're also the restaurant. The city of Forest Lake is also the restaurant hub of this same area. Most of our deliveries go to rural areas in between us and the smaller towns that are around us within about a 20-mile radius, or 20-mile radius, 40-mile diameter around the city of Forest Lake. Now, how do you navigate a market like this? No connection with the Twin Cities, really. I like to joke that we don't live in the sticks, but you can see them from here. So, Forest Lake, 21,000 residents. Wyoming to our immediate north, 8,000 residents. Hugo to our immediate south, 11,000 residents. Scandia, a rural municipality to our immediate east, 5,000. Columbus, same to the west, another 5,000. The Chisago cities of Chisago City, Lindstrom, and Center City, combined population of around 11,000. Many of our deliveries go to all of these places. And so, for DoorDash purposes, this is our market area, a region of about 60,000 people. It's not enough. So the first thing that you got to realize when you're in a market like this is that you cannot do it full time out here. You just can't. It's very effective as a side hustle, but it's not good enough by any means to be a full-time income. You just can't. There's not enough business out here to do that, despite the relative vitality of the Forest Lake restaurant market. We also have a lot of people that come through the region, and a lot of people with even vacation homes in this region. But we don't have enough of a residential business with those population numbers to generate full-time incomes for any drivers. The good news is that we have a relatively low number of drivers out here, relatively speaking. But this creates kind of a wave effect. You know, there's times when the market, when everybody in the market seems to be logged on at once, and it seems like it's oversaturated. There's also other times like today where it just seems like Uber's throwing me massive Walmart orders. Like, you know, go 10 miles and get $40 type of thing. Mega profitable ones where there just are not a lot of drivers on in the middle of a weekday. But if it's a weekend, it goes completely kaput. Because then the apps do have a lot of drivers logged on relative to the population and relative to the market size. So it kind of goes up and down out here, and you got to be ready for that inconsistency in a market that is small and relatively separate from the metro region that it is considered a part of. So again, this market is what is called ex-urban, not suburban, ex-urban. Ex-urban markets are areas that have commuter connections to a larger metropolitan area, which we do, the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area. But economically, as far as direct trade is concerned, between us in the immediate area, we have no connection to the Twin Cities at all. All of our business and trade is with those immediately surrounding small towns and rural areas in between. So that's where we get our shoppers for the Target and the Walmart from. Is the immediate area with those smaller towns and cities that are within 10, I think maybe 15 miles of the city of Forest Lake. So you just got to know that you can't do this full time in a market like this at all. But it can be a very effective side hustle, and on weekends it can be a very effective extra income, particularly given the fact that people do tip fairly generously out here. It's not an urban market by any stretch of the imagination. We're a small town. We have I wouldn't call simple folk. A lot of people are of very good means out here. But they're not snobby either. They know that the drivers are coming, a fairly long way to reach their house. You're out in the middle of the sticks, you're 15 miles outside of the city. You know that driver's coming through rural pathways and back roads to get to them. So the tips do match accordingly. They are very generous. I get a fair number of cash tips out here. That part is actually very strong. So if you're in a smaller market and you have more salt of the earth people like we do, you probably can get a decent number of cash tips after the fact, even if they already tipped in the app. Of course, my most unique tip was that carton of farm fresh eggs I got from that farmer. Another unique twist of being in a small market. You get some interesting gifts. And in my case, I got one from this very nice lady who can't tell if she's married or not, but she has chicken coops, farm fresh eggs. The brown ones, the really good ones, by the way. Got them from her, and I said, you know what? I came back for a second time on a later delivery. I said, you know what? Appreciate them. They were very good. She said, oh, thank you. So these are very salty of the earth people if you're in a smaller market, particularly up here in the Midwest. They're very, very kind. And also another problem that you get in a smaller market sometimes is that DoorDash will come after you for not having pictures of the food. Sometimes what I have to do is I have to have them hold the bag because a lot of people up here want to meet us as drivers. They want to come out and meet the drivers. People are that way up here. So that is one other adjustment of being in a smaller market that you kind of have to get used to. The apps want to have pictures of everything dropped off on the porch, but sometimes they'll just come out and meet you because, again, salt to those people, that's just what they do. I love this market. I really do. I can't make, I know that I can't make a full-time living in it, but that said, very good, salt of the earth, very warm people. They want to meet their drivers. They don't want the mystery drop-offs, usually. Some of them do, but not always. But you can't do it full-time. That's the first realization that you have to face when you're in a smaller market with a modest population such as ours. Again, 60,000 in the immediate delivery area for DoorDash. For Uber, it gets a little bit larger because they allow deliveries that go further out and have further pickups. So their radius expands out to about 30 miles from the city of Forest Lake. We can get deliveries into Wisconsin. We're about 20 miles from the St. Croix River, which is the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. So in the Uber delivery area includes the towns of Taylors Falls, Minnesota, St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, and Osceola, Wisconsin. Because again, Uber doesn't care as much about the freshness of the food, whereas DoorDash does. They will not allow deliveries from restaurants that far out. But the 30-mile radius is doable on the Uber app because They're desperate for market share in Forest Lake. Again, as I've said before, DoorDash has them outbeat by about 90% to 10%. I've done this with my own tracking of orders. Today, of course, being the exception because Walmart was very busy. People were loading up for the 4th of July up here. I had a lot of great trips that went out. I didn't have any that went the whole 30 miles out. But I had a couple of them that were within, a stone's throw of the Wisconsin border. But I had 3 of those trips today. Total number of stops was 7, a 2, a 2, and a 3. And the total payout on those was $280 on 3 trips with a total of 7 stops. Furthest ones went within about 5 miles of the Wisconsin border in the St. Croix River. So kind of just outside the edge of the DoorDash territory, but within the Uber territory. These are the little quirks that you kind of have to notice if you're in a small market. Is how far the apps are willing to take you. Again, Uber takes you further than DoorDash because DoorDash cares about the freshness of their food. They don't allow extended deliveries. Also within the Uber delivery area is also the city of North Branch, which is about 15 miles north of Forest Lake. DoorDash doesn't have very many deliveries that go all the way up there, but Uber does. So about 15 miles up Interstate 35 is the city of North Branch. Actually, it's closer to 15 to 20 miles north. So a lot of Uber deliveries will take you up that way. You also have to be careful on Uber because once you get that far up, then they'll take you further and further out, especially for one of those accept everything drivers, which is another reason why I highly do not encourage you in a smaller market if you're on Uber to accept every delivery, because you could wind up 2 hours north of you in no time flat if you accept everything. If you go outside of your immediate area, then it'll take you further out and further out and further out. Before you know it, you're 100, 200 miles north of your home. These are the quirks that you need to notice that when you're in a smaller market. Where do the apps take you? Where do the deliveries come from? And again, you also just realize that customers are generous, but the volume doesn't support it. Does not support full-time driving in the Forest Lake market. It's great as a side hustle. It's terrible as a sole income. It's never been my sole income. Still isn't. But with that said, that's just how to navigate a small market. Pay attention to the restaurants that you're picking up from. Pay attention to the distances. Track these things. See where you're going out to, where you're coming back from. What's the regular routine? What days are better than others? You want to notice these in any market, but the smaller markets, they're very geographically aligned a certain way. As far as how far out you go, what you're delivering, and who you're delivering to. Are they in rural areas? How many of your trips stay in town? Not many of ours do. So that is my tips on navigating a small market. I could go on all night long, but I don't have all night. So I will talk to you folks on the next round. Peace out, homies.